Hey everybody, Mike with Games Play Badly, and today on Session Zero, I'm talking to Dan from the Critically Thinking D&D Discussion podcast. Now, I was on Dan's show probably, I think it actually aired a couple weeks ago, and it was awesome. I really enjoyed talking to him, and the way that he does his interviews are really, really cool. I like the whole format and the discussion. I was really interested to turn the tables on him and get him on the interviewee side of things. So that's coming up, and I think you're going to really enjoy that. Also, I have my Dungeon Glitch t-shirt on. Dungeon Glitch is a collection from Gemmed Firefly that is all ttrpg gaming related. If you like this shirt and you would like to find more like it or pick this exact one up, you can go to gemfirefly.com and search around. He has shirts, flags, mugs, all sorts of different stuff. And when you get ready to check out, go ahead and use our Badly15 discount code and you'll get 15% off your order. I can't wait for you to get a chance to sit down with Dan and I. That interview starts now. Hey Dan, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm great. I'm really glad that I got a chance to sit on the other side this time. We did an interview for your podcast, which is Critically Thinking, a D&D Discussion.
Yep.
And I really loved it so much that I wanted to have you on to talk about it.
Amazing. I'm stoked to be here. As I said, it's always a pleasure to be the guest rather than the host for a change.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That's how I felt when I was on yours. I'm like, I don't have to do anything. I didn't even have to turn my camera on. I mean, anyway, I was gonna say for all you know, I was in my underwear, which I wasn't, but
that's a two-way street, my friend.
So tell me more about your podcast. I mean, you have quite I found it really unique. You'd put kind of like a call out to people saying, hey, would anyone like to do this? And I was immediately on board just because you have an interesting hook for your interviews.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thinking critically is an idea I had back in the dark times of the tail end of 2019. When actually no 2020, tell a lie. God, the last like 3 years I've just given up trying to work out when stuff happened in relation to today. November at some point, let's say. And I had a thought at some point, I think it was like driving home from work or something, and I just thought, wouldn't it be that's a good idea. It's, I had an idea for a single word, and I was like, that's a good idea to talk about within a D&D context. And I thought you could probably spin a full podcast out of that one tiny little trope I had in my head, which was just a single word. I want to talk about what this word is because it was so ambiguous. So the general conceit of thinking critically is that we take a single word or topic, and I have a different guest on each week to discuss that single word or topic. The point being is that they are, well, some more than others, deliberately ambiguous and obtuse and maybe esoteric to a certain extent, so that when the guest comes on and they go, well, actually, I define editions as this, and I go, oh, never ever would have thought of that. And that's basically the premise of the show, me being surprised by the interpretation of the English language, which is a really romantic way of saying I talk about D&D.
Right. And that's what really got me. I just love the idea. I did one on hooks, and I thought that was really interesting because you're a great interviewer. You really bring out a lot of interesting topics that I wouldn't have thought about. You take that one word and you weave that into an entire podcast, and it's a masterclass in my book.
Thank you.
It really is. I mean, I thought you handle it. I mean, for anybody who hasn't, I'll have the links down below to Dan's podcast. It's amazing. Definitely go and listen to it. Find the word that you find interesting and go and listen to it, because again, also, I mean, culturally, those words can mean different things, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something I've been very fortunate in that I've managed to have so many guests from all over the world now. I've had one from Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Malaysia, several from North America, Belgium, Germany as well, and of course a couple from my home country of England, United Kingdom. And yeah, no, that's a really good point. And not only culturally, but also in the wider sense, but also in the micro sense of how people play games, in those areas. and what it means to play those games in that part of the world approaches some topics from drastically different vectors than I would have ever thought to approach them in.
I think it's brilliant from the standpoint of it opens up so many avenues of conversation, and it really kind of, it becomes a very robust interview encompassing not only that word but everything that it kind of involves. And then obviously there are those branches. So how many episodes do you have up now?
Oh gosh, 26 if you count my self-indulgent season 1 wrap up in season 1, 25 in season 2, and I think by the time this one comes out 17, 18, 19 in season 3. But I've actually recorded, funnily enough, all the way up to the end of season 3, so another 25 episodes. And
oh my goodness,
an arbitrarily good a number as any to curtail a season or a series, as I think is the Americans call them.
Yeah. So you have a whole bunch of content out there. Out of all the words that you've used, what do you think surprised you the most as far as response goes?
Oh man, that is a good question. The funny thing is, like, obviously some more obvious, and can be construed in fewer ways. So I have a couple of topics on really straight line stuff, like streaming, for example, was pretty, here's how you stream ttrpg content, and there's very little kind of wiggle room in there. But then you have others like let me find one here, like voices, for example, season 2 episode 12, which could be, you could take that in so many different ways. So I'm trying to find one now that is more on that side of things, which is really where. So actually, a good one that's just appeared for me here is season 1, episode 18, on space, with some friends of the show, Tabletop Journeys. So all my notes on that going into that episode was how to do sci-fi in D&D 5e, and like, what is Spelljammer, and how do you world build when the fantasy setting is ostensibly on a single planet, when you kind of want constellations and stuff. How does that really work when space isn't really a concept in medieval time? And the guests were like, here's how combat encounters work in a field of war kind of thing. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, let me just completely change my brain for a second, because I'm thinking like up in the sky, and these guys are thinking very down low. And that was great, because it leads to me being like, educate me please, because I don't know what we're talking about now. And so they were very much like, obviously in 5e, a character or monster of medium size occupies a 5-foot kind of field of influence in a melee. And they were talking about why that, the historical baggage of that, where that's come from, why it's important, where it's accurate, where it's inaccurate, and why it matters. And I was like, okay, that's good. That's gonna as the producer of the show, I was like, great, this conversation is going to take up half the episode. Wicked, fine. Which means that my notes are then very comfortable in the second half of the episode. But also I was like, yeah, I was not expecting that at all. So that was a really interesting to be like, oh, okay. And then they brought up their experience in LARPing, because they were like, when we were live action role playing, it really does work, and then you get an appreciation for the space of the encounter and where people lie and positioning and stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, but what about like spaceships? When can we talk about spaceships, please?
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you can hear the audible brakes hit. You're like, wait, what? I hate sci-fi.
So that's a classic example of a bit of a ambiguous topic that got taken into very literally up and down, kind of physically up and physically down conversations, which was a good example. I'm just trying to look through now to see if there's any others. I mean, some are I've got topics like adaptation, which is again
very ambiguous.
Yeah, everybody listening now is like thinking in their own ways of that. I mean, at the very least, there's Necklace of Adaptation, an item in D&D 5e, which allows you to breathe underwater or something. I'm not sure. So on the face of it, you could spin a show out of that. Not that we did, of course. That's probably the biggest one, the space one, off the top of my head. And shout out to my guys, Tabletop Journeys, as well.
That's awesome. I mean, that's kind of what I was looking for. I mean, you get a word and it's completely innocuous, and all of a sudden it turns into something completely different. So
yes, yeah.
And that's where, as a showrunner, it can take you off your square a little bit, as we would say.
Yeah, I think I don't know, upbringing, I don't know, personality, I don't know, but somehow I can at least, I'm very good at blagging my way through things, is what I'm beating around the bush. So when that does happen, I can quite quickly, fortunately enough, act like I knew it was going to happen all along. This is where you're going to catch me out now with a proper left field question, and I'm going to be left floundering like a fish. But
so you mentioned so you have notes that you take down prior to the actual interview.
Sure, yeah, it's a funny story actually, because when I first started the show, my notes were like, I was obviously paranoid and really trying hard to make I wanted to make a good product, right? As anyone does who's creating content. I wanted it to be good, and I didn't want there to be dead air or us to record an hour and there only be half an hour of content. So I put the script in, my notes, the opening, the outro. I put in several topics and like references and this, that, and the other. And now I like to say that, I mean, this is a little bit behind the scenes, but sometimes I can knock out enough notes half an hour before we're recording. In my defense, I've got a very busy life, so sometimes I only have half an hour before recording.
And yeah, I'm lucky if I have pants on at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, and that's the other thing. Like, I don't often use camera, and so sometimes the guest has, I leave it to them. If they want to, I let them lead. If they want to have the camera on, that's fine. And sometimes they'll be sitting there like we are now with their camera on. I'm like, oh, sorry, I just need to go and I'll just grab a drink quickly. And that is my elaborate ruse to be like, I need to put some clothes on because I might also grab a drink. So it's not a complete lie, but.
So, I mean, and I think that's the brilliance of it. So I tend to do my shows unscripted. I used to take notes and I'd refer back to them like a good interviewer would. And then I realized that I wanted to be surprised.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to be fun for me too. And so what I would do is I would just kind of, and what I do now is it's kind of almost a stream of consciousness, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. But I want people to watch these interviews and be surprised with me.
I mean, I think I'm probably one step towards scripted, but obviously not all the way there. In that, I mean, yourself, because we recorded not too long ago. Whereas in the preamble spiel, I say to the guest, and then the next 55 minutes or so is open discussion. We have an introductions, we have an outroductions, and then we have the 55 minutes in the middle of discussion, and that's it. I just go off on tangents, bringing anecdotes, whatever you want to do, and that's pretty much it. I say I've got 4 or 5, usually bullet points is where I'm at nowadays, and that's usually enough to plug if the conversation does come to a natural end, and we're only half the way through. I can be like, okay, well, here's another point that I had, and that's it really. I've just been very exceptionally lucky that all the guests are fantastic, and I think it's a testament to the hobby that people are so knowledgeable and passionate about it, and are happy to just have those good faith discussions that easily fit within 1 hour, probably several hours if I had the time.
And that's the one thing, at least from the YouTube side of things, brevity is something that is difficult to achieve, just because I do enjoy talking to people and we have this natural back and forth.
I have started porting my episodes to YouTube, but literally no bells or whistles, the audio and image thumbnail, just as another platform for those who wish to listen to it on there, but very much not I'm not looking at the metrics in a way. I probably should start chopping and changing and upping the production values a little bit for YouTube, but at the moment it is very much, as you said, it's mainly just for convenience. For people around the world who want to listen to it via YouTube for whatever reason that may be, they can do so rather than having to use one of the other podcasting traditional platforms.
Yeah, I'm actually doing the exact reverse. I'm going through and I'm stripping all the video out and doing all audio, so that way I can go to that podcasting platform, whatever that is.
Yeah, we're passing each other like ships in the night in the opposite directions.
Why don't you tell me more about the history of the show? I mean, we know that you kind of developed it while you're driving home from work. What else? What other tidbits can you share with us?
Sure. So, we talked off camera ahead of time, but there was a episode that I unfortunately lost, which I don't get angry, right? I am classically British, despite my name. I'm classically British, very nope, I'll just grin and bear it and sit through. So I never get angry, generally in positive spirits. I was editing a particular episode that I had recorded with the guest, editing, blah, blah, blah. I was using, a piece of software, a popular piece of audio editing software at the time, which crashed and basically bricked the project because of the way that it operates on the back end. And I tried for about 40 minutes to salvage it before I realized what was required to salvage it. And that's when I called the time of death, essentially. And as I said, I don't get angry. I can probably count on one hand the amount of times I've been that angry. I think 2 times in my life I've been that angry, and this was one of them. And my partner was like, she just didn't, you know, when you just exude like an aura, that I was just like storming through the house. She just didn't speak to me all night. And then when we spoke in the morning, she was like, yeah, I didn't, because I could see you were fuming, and I didn't want to talk to you because I didn't want to like make it worse for you. And mainly it's because not only have I wasted my own time, I've wasted the time of the guest as well. And that's such a, you know, red face moment to be like, hey. And I'm so lucky that that was earlier on in the lifetime of the show, and it was with a friend who I play several games with, so it's fine. But even so, I was like, hey man, I just wasted your evening, and I'm really sorry about it, and there's nothing I can do, and I'm gonna have to waste potentially another evening to record again with you at some point. And I was so lucky that he was like, yeah man, I mean the journey was fun in of itself, so I don't really mind that there wasn't a payoff, because I'd be more than happy to do it with you again anyway. And I was like, that does lessen my rage a little bit, so thank you.
To allay your fears, I just did this. And we were talking about this before the show, but I was interviewing Hilarious Gaming, and Levi and I are here, and we're talking, we're having a great conversation, and I go to turn off the recording and realize I never started it. And that was like an hour-long conversation. So I was so, and the thing is, like, I don't get mad that it didn't record for me. I get mad because now I've wasted their time.
Yeah, exactly.
And
exactly.
You know, Levi was awesome. He came right back. We did it all over again. It was far more efficient because we'd already kind of done it. So, but I feel like we lost some spontaneity. But so don't feel bad, because I think that was like episode 36 I did this on. So I mean, like, at this point in time, I should know better.
Yeah, well, you know, accidents happen, but it's that wasting. And I always say to guests, as you're aware, I go, you know, off the record, before we start recording, thank you so much for your time. I know how precious it is. Every day that goes by, it's just more and more precious for people. So I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day. And then for me, an hour and a half later to go, gutted, didn't even need it because it's gone in the bin now. It's just a horrible feeling. But yes, I was very, very fortunate in the same way that you were to kind of get through that. But now I very much, you know, you learn from the mistakes you make. So now I'm like triplicate backups and triplicate recording methods, and I'm never losing this ever again, no matter what happens. The house could burn down and I've got a black box in an unknown location somewhere, because it's not happening again.
I think the Zoom stuff and everything obviously became more prominent when COVID hit. But I mean, from the technology side of things, how do you think it enhances or detracts from what you're trying to do as an interviewer?
So what was I using before Zoom? Discord, I think, or whatever, you know, whatever platform the guest was most convenient with. And now I don't yet do any bells or whistles. Like, I don't have, you know, Yeticaster. I'm not recording, you know, it's still only me at the end of the day. So there's a limit to how professional I can get. So yeah, that was a mixture of Discord and you know, whatever. And obviously doing all interviews so far remotely is you're kind of dependent on the guest that appears on the other end. And in many cases, I have never, you know, I've only talked via text before. I don't know the setup at all. I just say, you know, you need to record yourself locally, and that's it. So I have an obsessive personality, which manifests as a perfectionist personality sometimes. So my one hard requirement on the guests is for them to record themselves locally, because that's the best way to get the audio as best, because it's not compressed,
as clean as possible.
Yeah, it's local. It's not being, you know, latency over the internet, blah 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 blah. So I'm like, you should record yourself native, raw, locally, and then you send me that WAV file, and then I do all the post production my end, which you know, has caused its own problems in the past. As I said, I've had people from all walks of life, from people such as yourself to professional streamers to people in home studios to people like in their office at work, like literally in their place of work, who have just gone into the break room at the office and recording on their phone to all sorts of. It's a small part of being this podcast host is tech support sometimes, when people have like, where do I set my mic up and how do I set it to record mono, and I'm lucky that my professional background has included some of that in the past, so at least for my mum. So I am very eager and willing to help walk people through that process. But if I guess I'm just lucky, we're lucky that the technology of today's setup is very conducive and convenient and intuitive for the most part, that we can get that to happen. I did have one guest. There's two, to continue on the anecdotes from earlier on. There's two. Failed is too strong a word, but 2 misfires, shall we say, of episodes out of the 75 or so, probably 80 or 90 have recorded at this point. So one was, again, case in point, I just started recording with the guy. I'm taking him through the preamble, and I say, and we're going to do a bit of a test recording. And we did it, and I could hear myself bleed through quite substantially on his end, which is obviously going to be impossible to edit out with the 2 separate tracks, yada, yada, yada. Long story short is he didn't have headphones, so I was coming out of his speakers, obviously being picked up again by his own microphone. And I said, man, I don't want to waste any more of your time trying to rectify this right now. Let's put a pin in it and we'll come back to it later. And that is just a case of like meeting random people online. Is it gonna, you get as I said, it's all walks of life, from professional people who aren't, who don't have the gear and equipment, which is totally fine and fair enough. I'm not casting anything on that. I mean, that was me 13 months ago, so
that was all of us, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So it's that is what it is, all the way up to people who have got thousands of pounds worth of kit, because that's what their day job and their profession requires. So that's part of the fun for me personally, is having that initial like, hey, how you doing? I'm download from England, and what are you? And they go, oh, I've got this and I got that, and that's part of the excitement for me, is having that initial reveal and that initial kind of like, what are we working with here, what the situation's going to be. And that guy has recently messaged me actually to say, hey, I've got headphones now, so I'm good to go. So I'm looking to
finally got a pair of headphones.
Yeah, to book that in at some point. And then, if there's ever going to be a public forum for this story, it will be now, in that there was one episode that I recorded. There's only one so far. I don't know whether this is good or bad, that I've recorded and haven't used, which is your one. No, it isn't.
Right.
I pulled it.
Exactly. Too many complaints.
But obviously, to continue on with what I was saying, like, it's just me. I don't have a team of people to vet guests. It is just relying on the kindness and the willingness of strangers, and I've been incredibly fortunate that 99.999% of them have been very kind and very knowledgeable and very happy and great and wholesome. There was one guest who, I don't vet them. We have a quick discussion beforehand, decide on a topic, decide on a date. Cool, bish bash bosh, let's hope that it works. And as I said, it had done historically and has done since, so I'm not about to change that process. But we sit down and we go through the preamble and we start recording. I can't remember the topic for the life of me. It's buried away somewhere. It has gone back into the pool though, so it might resurface with a different guest at some point. But long story short, as we're talking, and then they mentioned a couple of things that I wasn't super comfortable with as a human being, I suppose. Just their stance on a couple of really hot topics and red flags in the ttrpg community. I'll spare you the details, but they were even for me, and as I said, I've spoken to so many people I've had all sorts on how they play games, from rules to no rules, items to no items, but even for me, I was like, this is really pushing it. But at the time I was like, right, no one wants to hear 2 people be awkward or argue. So I was like, let me just give the person the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's nerves, maybe it's whatever it is.
Right.
Let me just at least get the hour out of the way. Maybe with editing I can tidy it up a little bit. And we finished, and I was like, okay, thank you, cheers, I'll get back to you, normal, wrap up as you're aware, I'll message you here, I'll edit this, it's planned for this date, so on and so on. But then after turning it off, I was like, that is, I don't know whether I want to do that episode. I was really struggling internally with like, I don't want to essentially censor people in a way, and they've given me, they've given me their time to talk about this kind of stuff. But on the other hand, I was like, they're a bit of a bad person, so what do I do? It was a unique moral quandary for me, having been fortunate enough to get through my life to not be in that situation before. Anyway, the next day they messaged me saying, I don't know, don't use the episode please, because I don't agree.
You realize how terrible they were?
Yeah, basically. And then I was at work at the time, so I saw it and was like, okay, well, that's taken the decision out of my hands, which is fine. I'm going to sound more pretentious now, but it's the line we have to walk as content creators, is the responsibility to the consumers to have a good quality product, but then responsibility as a human being not to crap all over somebody's day and what they do. So it is a very awkward line to walk, to be like, hey, I really appreciate your time, but the content wasn't quite there. And just to wrap up that story, to really put the cherry on top, as it were, is, as I said, I was at work when I got their message, and I was like, okay, fine, that's okay, cool, problem over, problem resolved. That can just be one lesson learned, like, probably should have called that a bit earlier, but lesson learned, from our mistakes, as I said. So I didn't reply because I was at work. About 6 or so hours later, they messaged me again, being like, oh, you're ghosting me now, I guess, blah, blah, blah. They got into a bit of a strop about it.
Oh my.
And that was when I went, yeah, this is the right decision. Now, this is like,
block.
Yep, off you go. That episode is not for use. And I just replied, I always like to be cordial and stuff. And I just said, hey, I was working, but I understand your wishes and it won't be used. And that was it. And I haven't had any correspondence with them again. But that's as bad for me, luckily, as it's got, which in the grand scheme of things, losing an hour and a half to record an hour's time is nothing. So I'm quite happy with that. I don't care about wasting their time in this instance.
Yeah, if they're terrible people, then
yeah, they can waste all the time they want.
yeah. So you basically have your season 3 already recorded, yeah?
Luckily, yes, but please don't assume that is how I operate normally. This is just the stars have aligned, and actually, I'm doing myself a disservice, as I have been quite, my partner's been very patient with me, as I have been exceptionally busy with recording for basically the last 4 months, 2 a week, 1 a week. So it is, but it's very feast and famine with myself. So
I get that.
I don't have currently I do have 4 booked recordings for the next couple of weeks, but outside of that, there's no formal process for getting guests. There's no chain. There's no conveyor belt. It is very much on me to be like, let me go out and find them. So how I've done that is basically leveraged Twitter, and twice now I've got, I very lucky that I've got, a nice close knit group of friends who are very keen to talk about D&D. So the first few episodes are with people I know in real life. And then I eventually put calls out. What did I do? I messaged one guy on Instagram, one guy on Reddit, actually, in season 1, and then the rest through Twitter, literally just like similar from their profiles and the kind of stuff they produce, similar style, and just reached out. That was it for me. I just reached out in that season 1 and just said, hey, I'm starting this. Can you be a part of it, please? Because you seem cool and you seem like you'd be up for talking about D&D with some random dude from England. And again, all of that was perfectly fine, and I've had those guests on several times since, because they're great and they have a special place in my heart for helping me through those early days. And once that ball had started rolling a little bit, I basically posted on Twitter a couple of hashtags, a little meme thrown in for good measure, just to say I'm looking for guests, and that just exploded. So when I'm coming down, I'm like, I'm kind of editing 1 episode a week to push it out that Friday. I'll do something like that, and then suddenly the next 2 months will get filled up with recordings, and I only need a couple per week, a couple times, to be ahead of the curve again.
It's always good to have stuff just kind of waiting to be posted. I tend to not have that because I get excited about the interviews that I do and I want to post them right away. We kind of know how you figured out the podcast idea, but was there a why?
Yeah, that's a good question actually, because
that you fed to me.
No, not at all. God, trying to make me sound well arrogant. What bloody fantastic question! Literally, there's not a better question. But no, what with the time period that we were all in at that time. I was obviously, as with many people around the world, stuck at home. And although I had never been a content creator before in any stretch of the imagination, it's kind of easier to consume if you're out all day working and then you come home and all you want to do is switch off and you want to consume media and content, and that's fine. But then being stuck at home as I was, and not only stuck at home, I was also on furlough, so I was out of work kind of for 7 months of the year. Now I busied myself fixing my garden, which is good because it was in dire need of being fixed, but it also got to the point where I was like, I have this time, I feel like I could do, I just wanted to kind of I wanted to add value to the universe, right? I was consuming, and I was like, do you know what? Maybe I should add something, fight against the entropy of the universe and create something and give something to other people, maybe, after consuming so much for myself. So it really was, that was one point. I was like, let me just try and make something for the first time in probably 20 years. Let me try and make something.
Right.
I've done it at school and at college and university and stuff, but outside of that part of my life, I haven't really created something new or unique or creative endeavor for quite some time. So let me try and scratch that itch a little bit. And obviously the conceit of the show means that I have a different guest every week, so it's a very useful avenue to speak to people from all around the world as it happens. So it was very, it basically scratched a number of itches at once and evolved into whatever kind of beast it is today. But it was really that honest, like, I just want to try and make something. Let me leverage my ability to talk about D&D.
Right.
Which is very, very easy to leverage.
But the people who said D&D wasn't going to get me anywhere. Still hasn't, but I'm talking about it.
Yeah, we're on the tracks at least, yeah. But no, I as I said, like, I had not created anything before. I don't think I even had a webcam. I had, my microphone on this, in terms of my audio quality, was just the one I used for TeamSpeak to play Left 4 Dead. Like, that was, that's my audio setup. And so for the first few episodes were recorded on that. And after they turned out really well, again, predominantly thanks to the guests, that's when I was like, let me think here about, again, obsessive perfectionist, let me think about maybe getting something that isn't just a
right,
quote unquote gaming mic. But I went literally from no gear, no idea, to some gear, still no idea, to now some gear and some idea, but as you'd hope after editing many hours of content. But yeah, literally from nothing to what is audio editing? What is a WAV file? How to podcast? I searched, like that was literally starting from nothing, despite being technical in both my personal and professional life in terms of audio production and making a podcast. It was literally like, start from my web search engine and go from there, and then be like, oh, I shouldn't just record in the Windows voice recorder memo app, because that will be stupid. Right, I mean, that's how people do it. Okay, now I need a host. What's a host? So yeah, literally from nothing to knowing a little bit now.
Dan, first of all, I love your podcast. I think it's a brilliant idea. You execute it very, very well. I think you bring a lot out of your guests, your questioning, and the way that you relate to the people that you're talking to is fantastic. I think you're built for it, and I can't wait to see what else you produce. I try and listen when I can, and hopefully I'll be doing more of that here after the next couple of weeks. But anyway, I do something on this show called a quick fire challenge.
Oh God, okay. You didn't tell me about this beforehand. I'm scared.
Yeah, I didn't. I was going to, but then I said, screw it. These are some hard-hitting questions that are going to require a lot of brain power to answer, but I'm sure you'll be fine. And I'm going to ask these questions. All you got to do is shoot off the first thing that pops into your head or whatever. So it's pretty free form, but we'll just get to it. That way you're not too scared. All right. So how do you take your tea?
Oh, okay. I guess I don't really drink like what we know in the UK is builder's tea. So if I was forced, I would just have like green tea from the bag and as it comes with no extra additives.
Okay. So are you not a big tea drinker to begin? Yeah, because builder's tea is what
Never.
you would think, because you sit there and put a biscuit in it and you're good to go.
Yeah, no, never. Mum will drink it until the cows come home. So I'm surprised I'm not, frankly, growing up with her. But no, not.
So that was a rather racist question. So I'll move on.
Not at all. Not at all.
I actually did ask this guy. I said, "So what is your?" I said, "Bourbon or Scotch?" And they're like, "I'm a recovering alcoholic. I don't drink." I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, then that gets edited out." You know.
Yep. Whoops. I've had my foot in my mouth plenty of times, both online and in person. So
absolutely, yeah. Foot and mouth is one of my favorite positions, apparently. Cake or pie?
So I'm gonna say cake because cake is sweet and pie is very savory. So I
see that's interesting, because we were talking earlier about words and their cultural context. In the United States, we don't really like, you have a chicken pot pie, like savory pies, yes, but we have like pumpkin pie and apple pie. But everybody I've talked to from the UK is like, it's a savory pie.
Yeah, so we do have like I could go and get from my local supermarket a cherry Bakewell pie, and it will be called that. But I think that the cultural consensus is that a pie is like a steak and ale, or a kidney steak and kidney pie. That's hot. You'd get in a pub somewhere with chips or fries. To translate for you on the side. Whereas cake is like carrot cake or red velvet cake or Victoria sponge or something like that. So immediately it's like, well, nah, because I want to eat like sweets. I don't want to eat like
right.
So that's why. That's a little context for you there on that one.
So you and I were both talking about we'd like to imbibe adult beverages occasionally. Are you more of a beer kind of person, or are you a spirits kind of person?
A little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. So very much into my beers. So usually if it's a longer night, we will start on the beers, and then a certain point comes, as I'm sure you're aware, where you just can't quite stomach another pint of beer.
Anything.
At which point we will then transition over to gin. Is our me and my friend's current spirit of choice. Yeah, big G&T. I've got more bottles than I care to admit of gin downstairs. Alongside several cans of lager and beer, but yeah,
that's fine. I get you. So you're obviously have played D&D for how long have you played D&D for?
Probably about 6 years at this point.
Okay, that was something I didn't really ask you. So from the standpoint of a D&D monster, what do you think is your favorite?
Oh man, there's so many to pick from at this point.
There is, yeah.
Oh, geez, Louise. I'm going to be biased here to my own campaign and my own logic and stuff, and I'm going to say it's a bit cliche, but I do enjoy. I've got a Lich as my big bad, and I just think, all things considered, they are great because they have there is something human still about them. They might be undead, but at once there's still a bit of humanity maybe knocking around in there. They're not inherently alien like beholders. There's something still somewhat relatable to them. They're also incredibly powerful mechanically on paper, as well as in lore and in thematically powerful. So they've got a whole bit of bob in there, and they're just who doesn't like people kind of cursed to living forever by their own hubris and power, although they don't see it as a curse. I don't know. It's just great. There's just so much to work with there. They're also typically hella arrogant, which I love to roleplay, which again probably says more about me than I care to admit. But it's very easy for me to roleplay someone who's like, I'm incredibly powerful and I don't care about you peons.
Exactly. Yeah. Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I really enjoyed that. Unfortunately, a lot of this is going to end up on the cutting room floor. Maybe I'll release an uncut version at some point. But as usual, it's awesome conversation. So, and that's kind of what you do.
Thank you so much. I've had lots of fun. More, flattered to have been asked to come on, and yeah, just had so much fun. It's so nice to not have the pressure of being the host.
Yeah, I get that too. Well, I can't wait to see what else you produce. And everyone, there will be links down below to the podcast so that we can find all that. If you like what you saw today, give me a thumbs up, give me a subscribe. Always appreciated. And Dan, have a great weekend, and I will talk to you soon.
You too, Mike. It's been a pleasure.